Right now, the NOPD is on the scene of two shootings. This is a camera we have in the 5300 block of Murray Street. This is in the 9th Ward. That's where police say one person was shot in the chest and died.
And also near the Lafitte Greenway, you see that crashed car there. That's part of the NOPD's investigation into another shooting on Conti Street. Another man shot. As soon as we hear more from detectives at both of these shootings, we will let you know.
Now, new information on last night's tornado. This morning, the National Weather Service was on the ground surveying the damage in Lafourche and Terrebonne parishes.
Chief Meteorologist Hank Allen is here to show us just how bad the storm was. Hank.
Yeah, lots of tornado warnings last night, of course. As expected, though, not really much production out of those, except for the one tornado that we had near Houma there. Including in Lafourche Parish. So basically starting around Houma, we picked up some of that rotation, then it moved off to the northeast. That storm did up through parts of Lafourche Parish here. The peak winds of 95 miles per hour, so an EF1, some structural damage there, but this is probably one of the smallest tornado paths that I've ever seen. 50 yards wide, and look at this, only 0.19 miles. And so that means this thing really just dipped down very quickly, touched down, and then pretty much lifted back up instantaneously, but did cause some damage. And Jordan Lippincott went down there to find out what all was going on. Jordan.
Yeah, Hank, homeowners still cleaning up that damage. And we spoke to them. A man who lives on Holly Street in the community of Bayou Blue says it only took the tornado a matter of seconds to leave its mark. Luckily, no one was injured, but there was quite a bit of damage. The homeowner tells me when he and his family walked outside once the tornado passed, what was left of their awning was blowing in the wind. And later, they discovered a portion of it on a nearby street. Needless to say, the experience shocked neighbors.
But it was a lot of noise for, like I say, 5 to 10 seconds, and it was over with. But hey, wind's nothing to fool around with, I can tell you. It scared the heck out of us, you know.
Fortunately, the community is getting by with a little help from their friends. And I'll have details on how they're getting that help coming up at 6. Kurt, Susie.
All right, thank you, Jordan. We now know the names of the final 2 people who were found dead inside this home on Gentilly Boulevard at the beginning of the month. One of them was a teenager. She's identified as 14-year-old Ivana Jackson. The body of 43-year-old Wilman Jackson was also found inside the home. Earlier this month, the coroner identified the homeowner as 50-year-old Alonzo Jackson. Police say the 3 bodies had been inside the home for days before they were found. All 3 deaths have been ruled homicide by shooting.
And new information tonight in the case of an LSU student who was raped just hours before she was struck and killed by a car on January 15th. 2 men arrested in connection with the investigation have bonded out of jail. 28-year-old Everett Lee and 18-year-old Kason Carver are out of jail. They are accused of being in the car where 2 other men, 18-year-old Caven Washington and a 17-year-old boy, allegedly raped Madison Brooks. According to the case affidavit, the 4 men eventually dropped off Brooks in a neighborhood near Burbank Drive. She had a blood alcohol level of 0.319, which indicates alcohol poisoning, when she was struck by a car and killed. Kayvon Washington remains in jail. The 17-year-old has not yet been to court.
2 NOPD officers are under investigation tonight. The department's Public Integrity Bureau reassigned Sergeant Dylan Pazon and Officer Britney Kimbrough for violating department policy. Police say it is a criminal investigation. They have not released any additional details. In Lafourche Parish, these 2 Houma men, 22-year-old Michael Jules and 19-year-old Javante Miller, robbed 2 people at gunpoint, stealing their car, according to deputies, who also say the 2 admitted to the crime during a traffic stop. They're facing armed robbery and drug charges.
Covering America, renewed calls from some folks for gun control after the latest mass shootings.
ABC's Rena Roy reports on new details from the courtroom in the case of the Half Moon Bay killer and what investigators are saying about a random attack in Washington.
67-year-old Chun Li Zhao facing a judge on 7 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and charges of enhancing a firearm. The families of 7 innocent farm workers now grappling with their sudden loss, including Servando Martinez, who says his 50-year-old brother, Marciano Martinez Jimenez, was killed in the attack. Martinez says his brother was a good person and good co-worker who was an admired supervisor, and that the loss has left the family broken. Police taking down the suspect hours after the massacre, after they say he opened fire at 2 farms Monday in Half Moon Bay, California. Officials calling this a workplace violence incident.
This is not supposed to happen here. These are good people.
Meanwhile, in Yakima, Washington, 3 people killed Tuesday after a random attack at a convenience store. Officials say the shooter didn't buy anything or say a word before killing 2 customers and a man in his car at a gas pump. Authorities saying the suspected gunman later died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. All of this after 11 were killed during a Lunar New Year celebration at a dance hall in Monterey Park, California. A newly released Secret Service report showing a gun was used in nearly 3/4 of the mass attacks carried out in the U.S. from 2016 to 2020.
What the hell is wrong with us that we allow these weapons of war and large capacity clips out on the streets and sidewalks? Why have we allowed this culture, this pattern, to continue?
The White House now renewing calls for gun control. Vice President Kamala Harris visiting with families of the victims in the Monterey Park shooting. Rena Roy, ABC News, Half Moon Bay, California.
Still ahead on WGNO News, picking up the garbage. What the city council says may finally be the fix to getting trash collection back on track.
Plus, some Louisiana Democrats have said enough is enough after problems with the chair of the state party. Find out who's leaving either their post or the party altogether.
The number of murders in New Orleans sounds awful enough. 265 people murdered last year. But here's a visual representation from an artist who says we need to let that number sink in. Each glass face on this display outside City Hall today represents one of those 265 victims. Artist Mitchell Godet wants the faces to reflect the humanity of the victims.
It's a community problem. We can all empathize with what's going on with this. I hope we all can empathize what's going on, but also just to this person, it could be any of us at any time right now, the way crime is happening in the city. So it's a scary time.
Godet has done a different glass representation of the murders in our city for the last 8 years, and he displays them outside City Hall, not as a political statement, just for the public to be able to see it.
High school students from Edna Carr, Eleanor McMain, and McDonough 35 are saying enough. In fact, Inspire NOLA Charter Schools is hoping to expand the conversation on how New Orleans can combat violent crime in the city. Kenny, you were there and have more details on that.
Well, as you know, Kurt, just yesterday there was a shooting where one student got shot at Booker T. Washington High School. And this just shows our kids aren't always safe, not even at school. But Inspire NOLA Charter Schools, Edna Carr, Eleanor McMain, and McDonough 35 are showing they want to do something about it. Today's students showed unity as they walked, held hands, and had a moment of silence for their friends and family members who have fallen victim to gun violence on our city streets.
So I need parents to get involved. I don't need to see a plethora of parents when it's a party, because we ain't gonna have too many parties if we keep dying. We're not gonna have a second line. We're not gonna have Mardi Gras if it's completely unsafe to pump gas.
Now, after the Peace Walk, students met in the gym for a presentation where local leaders asked students to stand up and raise their hand if they knew someone personally who was shot, a victim of gun violence. Almost every single student raised their hand. Many mentioned just how heartbreaking that was to see. Now, students said today that they are tired of going to funerals. They're tired of going to balloon releases, and they're tired of being worried over Christmas break, that when they come back, their friends won't be in class.
That's incredible.
It's quite a statement. Yeah. Kids should not have to deal with that. Nobody, but especially kids.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kenny.
You're welcome.
The NOPD needs help to find a man accused in a carjacking case. Police say the man is responsible for a carjacking in the 2600 block of Drew Avenue earlier this week. The victim's car was recovered, but now police are searching also for the suspect's car. this rust-colored Kia Sportage. Investigators say the man was armed when he stole the victim's car.
And we're learning new details about what happened when a student got shot outside Booker T. Washington High School yesterday. The police say the 16-year-old was standing outside when an SUV drove up and the people inside started firing at him. The teenager was shot in the leg. He'll be okay. 2 students went to the hospital for other injuries, but they were not shot.
In Livingston and Ascension parishes, a man pleads guilty in a killing spree. In 2019, Dakota Terrio shot his girlfriend and her father and his girlfriend, then stole his father's car and drove to Ascension Parish where he killed his father and stepmother. Terrio appeared in both parishes, pleaded guilty to all 5 murders. In exchange, he received 5 life sentences, not the death penalty.
Former state senator Karen Carter Peterson is sentenced to 22 months in federal prison. Peterson pled guilty to defrauding her campaign and the state Democratic Party by using more than $100,000 to gamble. Peterson's attorney today asked Judge Sarah Vance to consider probation or home confinement, arguing that the fraud was the result of Peterson's gambling addiction. But Vance rejected the request. Peterson is supposed to start her sentence in March.
One Mardi Gras crew is giving us a better idea of the work required to get its preferred parade route back. The crew of Toth says it's responsible for getting 4 officers per block. That would be an additional 80 officers for their parade. The crew says the officers must be certified. The city says the officers must be certified in Louisiana, and hotels could be provided. The deadline for crews to secure any extra officers and notify the city is January 23rd.
Covering stories across America, the nation's airlines are back online after a massive computer failure brought thousands of flights to a standstill. The FAA is investigating a failure of the system that allows pilots to file their flight plans. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg says he's ordered a review to find out how it happened. But House Majority Leader Steve Scalise says after this and the Southwest problems at Christmas, a review may not be enough.
You're going to see a different level of scrutiny. We have got to have hearings and get some accountability because if he's not up to the job, I think the American people have those tough questions and they want them to be answered, and we're going to be asking those questions.
Well, the White House believes this was not a cyber attack.
New at 5, more than 1 million people in Louisiana have health care today that didn't 7 years ago.
That's when Governor Edwards signed an executive order to expand Medicaid. The story from reporter Jessica Knox.
Nothing will be more important ever than expanding Medicaid.
In 2016, Governor John Bel Edwards promised to expand Medicaid for the state of Louisiana. He believes there are 2 things that are keeping every hospital in the state open, especially in rural areas.
It's the Rural Hospital Preservation Act, which gives hospitals more reimbursement, more dollars to operate on than they would otherwise have. And then it's the Medicaid expansion on top of that.
Edwards says it is also helping with the state's finances, allowing over 700,000 working poor people to have access to routine care, as well as allowing hospitals to be compensated for the care that they are required to give by law.
We have brothers and sisters here in Amite, Louisiana, and all across our state who are alive today who would not be alive had we not expanded Medicaid.
But it has been an incredible difference, you know, and the people are getting what they need now compared to what they were not getting before.
But Edwards understands it is not perfect.
Putting a card in somebody's pocket is a necessary first step. It's necessary, but it's insufficient. One of the things you also have to have is a provider that's going to take that card to render the services that patient needs.
Edwards says he will spend his last year in office working diligently to work out the kinks and making sure it's hard for the next governor to overturn the expansion.
Next on WGNO News, 2 walks honoring crime victims in different ways. We'll share their stories.
Plus, some high school students are taking the classroom to the real world, how they're helping a neighbor with skills they learned at school. That's later on WGNO News.